Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. This week my supporters on Patreon voted for Witherbloom the Balancer as our commander. This 8 mana 5/5 dragon has flying and death touch as well as affinity for creatures. So it gets a 1 mana discount for each creature we control. So with enough creatures in play we can easily cast Witherbloom for just a black and a green. And then once it's in play, instant and sorcery spells we cast also have affinity for creatures. So if we can build up our board with enough creatures to cast a discounted Witherbloom in the first place, we'll sometimes also be able to cast a huge instant or sorcery alongside it for just 1 or 2 mana, and in the case of our various creature tutor effects, we'll be able to immediately put a Craterhoof Behemoth into play and attack for lethal. So that's really our game plan: go wide, cast Witherbloom, and then cast a payoff to close out the game. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split things up into a few different categories, starting with our mana acceleration, and these are mostly mana creatures, which will not only help accelerate our mana, but also discount Witherbloom with the affinity for creatures, so they do double duty. Then we've got our token makers, which also help discount our commander, as well as getting to benefit from the discount once our commander's in play, since a lot of these will be instants and sorceries. Then we've got some removal to help slow down the opponent's game plan, and then we get to our tutor effects, which are mostly going to be interested in getting our Craterhoof Behemoth in play as quickly as possible, and then with enough tokens that can just win us the game on the spot. But we also have a backup Endray's Forerunners, as well as the Hoarding Broodlord as other tutor targets. And then our miscellaneous section has a little bit more card draw, which can also help out. So yeah, that's really our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration, Dark Ritual can maybe speed things along as well. Our Boreal Grazer can put an extra land into play and then still discount Witherbloom going forward. And then we've got our more traditional mana creatures like Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, Elvish Mystic, Lenor Elves, and Deathrite Shaman is also great if you're playing black-green, since there's plenty of fetch lands in the format, has some additional utility outside of making mana. And then the new First Year is also worth it, as a 1 mana creature that still helps with affinity, and then it can Rampant Growth for 2 mana to get an extra land into play. Then the Badger Mole is excellent with all these mana creatures, and also gives us 2 bodies for affinity. There's a Fanatic, which can often make 4 mana in this deck. Lotus Cobra and Tireless Provisioner can generate additional mana with Landfall, and then we've got the Priest of Titania, which can maybe generate more than 1 mana if there's multiple elves in play. The Innkeeper makes a treasure when it enters and can gain life as more creatures enter, which also plays well with our token strategy. Carotid has built-in hexproof, so difficult for the opponent to remove. We've got the Enduring Vitality, making all our creatures tap for mana, so this is also excellent in any tokens deck. And then Vastwood Surge is our only non-creature ramp card, can still put 2 lands in play to maybe trigger landfall, but especially once we already have Witherbloom in play, we can easily cast this with Kicker, and then still put 2+1 counters on all our creatures, so it can also double up as a finisher. And then the Ice Still Explorer is also great with all the fetch lands that can then give us additional mana. And then we've got our token makers with a few creatures that can generate additional tokens, like the Bitterbloom Bearer, making a fairy at the cost of 1 life each turn. We've got the Sapperling Migration as a sorcery, which we can also easily kick with Witherbloom in play to make 4 tokens as opposed to just 2. The Nantuko with a Landfall, alongside Skewed Swarm, can also make a whole bunch of 1/1s. And then we've got our Verdant Command, similar to the Sapperling Migration, making 2 tokens for 2 mana, has some additional utility outside of that. Lord Skitter also doubles up as Graveyard Hate, making rat tokens each turn that can exile a card from a graveyard. The Satchmore Witch plays well with our other instants and sorceries, making pest tokens each time. We've got Audience with Trostani, which can also draw a few cards. Chatterfang also synergizes with the other token makers, making additional squirrels each time. Mouth to Feed is also quite nice, as we can first make a Hippo token, and then especially with Witherbloom in play, we can easily cast the Feed half to draw a few extra cards. Then there's the Catacomb Sifter, making an Eldrazi Scion token, and the Scion not only helps us discount Witherbloom with the affinity mechanic, but can then also still be sacrificed for an extra mana, since you can cast Witherbloom while the discount from affinity applies, and then as a part of paying for it, you can still sacrifice a Scion, but the discount already applied, so that's another important interaction to keep in mind. And then Moan of the Unhallowed can make a pair of zombies, can easily flash it back later to make even more. Parallel Lives will double all our tokens. Spore Swarm is 3 tokens at instant speed. We've got Army of the Damned, which is more of a payoff card once we already have Witherbloom in play, making 13 zombie tokens and can also be flashed back, and that also becomes trivial with our commander on the battlefield. For the Common Good can make extra copies of tokens we already have, gaining life and making those tokens indestructible. Pest Infestation can blow up artifacts and enchantments while making pest tokens. And Awaken the Woods is excellent as it's going to make a bunch of Forest Dryad creature tokens, which can then also trigger landfall and also tap for mana. So once again, having a creature token that also makes mana is perfect in your Affinity for Creatures deck. And then we get to our spot removal, where we have Cut Down and Fatal Push at 1 mana. Bitter Triumph can also deal with Planeswalkers. Chainer's Edict is nice as it has flashback, so we can maybe cast it twice, especially with our commander out. Terra Sunder, another flexible answer in Golgari. Dismember we can also cast on the cheap. And then Reclamation Sage can deal with artifacts and enchantments once again, while still being a body for Affinity. Pile On we can potentially cast for free, since it gets the discount from Affinity as well as from Convoke, so we can potentially just tap Witherbloom if we have at least 3 creatures in play, and then cast it without having to tap any lands for it, so it can easily be disguised. Then Fel the Profane, both a land or a removal spell, and Overwhelming Forces as a nice one-sided board wipe, since we don't really want to include any sweepers in our tokens deck, but if we can only destroy the opponent's creatures, then it's definitely worth it, and this will also draw us a few extra cards. And then we get to the tutor section, where we have plenty of ways to search up specific cards. Increasing Ambition can also be flashed back later to get whatever we want. There's Dark Petition with Spell Mastery, sort of paying for itself or even netting us mana if we get a discount from Affinity. And then the Hoarding Broodlord can also tutor up whatever we want. And then we've got our creature-specific tutor effects with Tooth and Nail, especially with Entwine, can get both Craterhoof Behemoth and the Endrace Forerunners to massively pump our team and close it out. And then we've got our other tutors here with Green Sun's Zenith. The Finale of Devastation can also pump our team if we cast it for X equals 10 or more. And then a Nature's Rhythm with Harmonize. And Court of Calling with Convoke also makes it trivial to cast it, as we potentially just need to tap 3 green creatures to cast it without having to tap any additional lands for it. And then our miscellaneous section has the Emissary, which can also gain life similar to the Innkeeper. The Revelation can draw cards equal to the number of creatures we control, and then the Symbiosis can also be a land, but can also be cast as a sorcery to maybe put a creature on the battlefield. And then I've split up the remaining mana base in the fetch lands and fetchable lands on the left, and then the remaining lands on the right. So plenty of basics. We've got Overgrown Tomb and Mortuary, which we can find with most of our fetch lands. And then some of our utility lands include Phyrexian Tower. Again, a reminder that you can first announce that you're casting Witherbloom, and then still maybe sacrifice a token to the Phyrexian Tower, contributing 2 mana, but still having contributed to the discount from Affinity. So the order in which you cast your spells is important, since you don't want to first sacrifice your token and then try to cast Witherbloom, because then the Affinity discount no longer applies. Then we've got our channel lands for added utility. Passing Sake can also Earthbend and essentially give us an extra creature. Evendo is incredibly powerful if we can get it online. Colony Garden enters tapped but makes a plant token, which is great here. And then plenty of other black-green dual lanes. Fountain Port can also maybe generate some extra tokens or draw cards. And both Urborg and Yavimaya also play well with our fetch lanes. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump in some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Silverquill, so the Battle of the Strixhaven Dragons. My hand's got potential, especially if I can keep this Lord Skitter alive for a couple turns. And we could cast it turn 1 with a Dark Ritual. Yeah, don't hate that. Can immediately start making tokens to discount Witherbloom. Unless our opponent's got a Source to Plowshares, wow. Yeah, that's painful. Alright, so could play the Nantuko, or I can wait until next turn to at least trigger Landfall with it. Since we don't have anything else going on, I think we wait. Yeah, not even getting a single rat token really hurt. Opponent's also going to be in the market for generating some tokens. Trawler, just a 3-1, exiles our graveyard. And a Lotus Cobra isn't bad either. Think I'm still leaning Nantuko for now. And then play the fetch. I can immediately sacrifice to guarantee another 1-1. Could also save the fetch for Cobra. I think we just sacrifice it now, so it'll be untapped next turn. Opponent with a Witch can generate some 1-1s. And a Provisioner, so we drew a bunch of landfall cards. Okay, I guess for now Provisioner. And then next turn we could maybe play Witherbloom. If I draw a land, I can easily go Lotus Cobra into Witherbloom and then still maybe play a 1 mana Increasing Ambition. Opponent with Mirkwood Bats, so now tokens will make me lose a life. Awaken the Woods, not actually a bad draw considering all these landfall cards. I don't think I'm gonna wait to play Lotus Cobra first, let's just cast it for 1. Make a treasure. And then next turn we'll be able to do some damage with Witherbloom. Opponent runs out Silverquill. And a Fountain Port to draw. Alright, so... Decisions. If I go a Lotus Cobra into Fountain Port, make a mana, make a treasure, I can play Witherbloom. And then... Do I still have enough green to Nature's Rhythm for a big amount? I think we'll be fine. So play Witherbloom. And then I could Ambition for just 1 mana here. Although Nature's Rhythm for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I can just get a Crater Hoof here. Cast it for 8. And get a Crater Hoof. And smash. Well, that's the power of Witherbloom, discounting our spells and setting up these powerful tutor effects. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Zoraline, so maybe a life gain deck. Our hand's promising. Ideally I can save the fetch lands and draw a different green source to get the Nantuko down. The drawback is maybe having to take more damage later if I want to fetch a Shockline, for instance. Opponent has a Deep Cavern Bat. I think we just dismember it. Although Zoraline can eventually get it back. So then I'm probably just getting a Forest, playing Caryatids. And then, well, now we drew the Forest, so we got rewarded for waiting. So then I can maybe trigger landfall multiple times. Convocation is next. Yeah, still gonna run out the fetch lane to get more tokens here. Could also bestow, to be fair, since it's on a hexproof creature anyway. Does mean 1 fewer creature to begin with. And then can fetch for a Surveil land. Can actually still make a copy of Caryatids. Let's see, I guess I can first decline, and then fetch. And then we'll make an extra Caryatids. Alright, so that worked out. And if there is a board wipe, at least we'll still get to Nantuko back. Shadow Spear, interestingly, can be a way to remove hexproof, and our opponent's potentially going to use it here. Doesn't come up very often, but yeah. The house grows hungry, destroys our enchanted Caryatid. That's alright, we can keep on making tokens, and then I could play Witherbloom. So we'll fetch and get a forest. Deathrite kind of pays for itself here with Witherbloom. Played for 2 mana, and then how much can I court for? We get a 7 mana discount, so I can get a Crater Hoof. I guess I can audience with Trostani first, since that's also free. And draw a bunch more tutor effects. Alright, so do it for 8. Tapping all the summoning sick creatures. And get a Crater Hoof. And smash. Well, if that doesn't show the power of Witherbloom, I don't know what does. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Emry, so the battle of the Affinity Commanders. I think we've got a Keeper with Deathrite into Priest, both are elves. So then the Priest will help us cast a Vastwood Surge to get our black mana sorted. Opponent with a wand to help them fill the graveyard, which now might also enable Deathrite if they mill a land. And Emry was naturally gonna do the same. Alright, so Deathrite is active. And that's a nice artifact land on turn 2. So Emry now just costs a single blue. Definitely easier to deploy Emry than it is Witherbloom. But once we get enough tokens in play to cast Witherbloom in the first place, it's not going to be too difficult to recast. Although we will have to watch out for potential auras that can shut it down. So ideally I can cast Witherbloom and an expensive sorcery in the same turn. Alright, Spellbomb can bounce stuff, so that's a pretty annoying combo with Emry, as I can just bounce the same creature turn after turn. So, what's my plan here? I'd still just play the Priest. And then next turn, even if they bounce the Priest, I'll still be able to Vastwood Surge, I think, since Deathrite will have an island. But yeah, Emry is a pretty broken commander, so we'll see what happens. The Tome can also find all sorts of goodies, including some removal spells. Okay. So for now we're spared the Aether Spellbomb bouncing our creature. And we'll go ahead and cast a Vastwood Surge. Could also cast Lord Skitter to help us exile stuff from graveyard, but there's currently no artifacts anyway. So yeah, let's Vastwood Surge. Does our opponent have a free counterspell perhaps? That resolves. And we'll pass a turn. Opponent's milling Blast Zone. So we might see Spellbomb bounce both our creatures this turn. If we can catch Spellbomb in the graveyard, at least I'll be able to exile it with Lord Skitter. So there's hope that we can kind of shut off that engine. Mishra's Bauble can also draw each turn. And Krang, well, that's one way to refuel. Possible they still have a counterspell in hand. I guess Force of Will is now also legal in the format. So possible they have that one. Opponent's going to use a Spellbomb on Deathrite Shaman. There's nothing I can really do here other than make a mana in response. So opponent hasn't used Emry yet. I imagine they want to get Bauble back, which will then leave the spell bomb in the graveyard for Lord Skitter. Alright, we drew a couple elves, so can try to play those first, and then tap the priest. And see if they have an answer to Lord Skitter. Okay, that resolves. So, sadly, I will not quite have the mana to cast Witherbloom, since the floating mana goes away here before I get the extra token, but let's get rid of that spell bomb. Okay, so now we're in a decent spot to maybe play Witherbloom next turn, cast a 1 mana Ambition, and then from there I could do some damage. But our opponent's got a full grip, so I'm sure they'll have some interaction. The Interlacer is pretty busted too, since the intensity doesn't go away once it's sacrificed, and the One Ring means that even if I did set up a lethal Crater Hoof, our opponent would still survive. So Emry gets back Bauble, triggering Interlacer, and Krang attacks. Gonna take it for now, preserve my tokens. Alright, so assuming no free counter spells, I could first trigger Lord Skitter to get an extra token, and then play 2 mana Witherbloom, which in turn can set up the Overwhelming Forces for just double black. Not sure what I would increasing Ambition for, since we can't attack for lethal yet. But I'm sure we'll figure it out, so first trigger Lord Skitter. I guess an alternate line could have involved using Lord Skitter to exile Krang after we wipe the board, but we can also use Deathrite for that. So play Witherbloom. That resolves. Now probably playing Fel the Profane as a land. So I can Overwhelming Forces. Ooh, never mind. This targets our opponent, and because of the One Ring, I cannot target the opponent. So I guess we'll have to increasing Ambition instead. And then what to get is a question. Possible our opponent's gonna fire off Force of Negation is extra painful, since that will exile my Ambition, so I won't be able to flash it back. Alright, in that case, I guess we'll just play the Parallel Lives and pass a turn. There's no creature to exile. So ended up taking 3 damage for no real reason. Well, hopefully the Overwhelming Forces resolves, and our opponent plays a few more creatures out here. Activate Tome, so we'll have to watch out for... Well, I guess our opponent ponders right away, so we don't have to second guess what they might have gotten. But there are some interesting ones here. I think Fog is one of them. Yeah, so that can potentially stop a Crater Hoof attack from being lethal. The Iron Crag is fine. Interlacer up to 3. And Emry gets back the Bauble, can't exile that one with Deathrite. Only instant sorceries and creatures and lands. If Krang attacks, I could consider trading for Witherbloom. Alright, opponent keeps going off. So they could still have a counter spell in hand. The Master Thopterist, so this is what we wanted. Our opponent tapped out. with an extra valuable creature we can sweep up. Make that 2. So unless they literally have Force of Will, this should resolve. Still nothing for Deathrite to get rid of, since, well, I guess never mind, since we do have the black mana, I can exile their Force, make them lose 2. Alright, and then I guess there's no real downside to casting the Vitality. So we'd get to draw 5 cards here, sweet. And Court of Calling for Craterhoof should do it. Just making sure I dot my I's and cross my T's here. So I could go Skewed Swarm first. Play a land, as well as play a kicked Saproling Migration. All the tokens get doubled by parallel lives. So then we can easily court for 8. Without having to tap any creatures that are attacking. So only needed to tap 3 creatures, get to Craterhoof. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Raph and Mikey. So this is going to be a race to basically getting to enact our plan as quickly as possible. Fatal Push is not going to help, since they typically don't have any mana creatures. So this hand's pretty lackluster. If we can find instant speed removal that deals with Raph and Mikey, like a Terra Sunder, I'll happily keep it. So this is much better. So we've got Token Makers on 2 and on 3. Turn 4 I may need to keep up Terra Sunder. Drawing Craterhoof is a little awkward, since now I won't be able to tutor it up anymore. And we already have a nice plant token. Possible our opponent will have a board wipe to get rid of all our tokens initially. Probably won't have time to deploy parallel lives. A Mind Stone. And a Lightning Greaves. Okay. So we'll make pair 1/1s and gain 3, I guess. Phyrexian Tower could be useful. So I could technically keep up Terra Asunder thanks to the Phyrexian Tower if we think our opponent's got maybe a ritual effect to cast Raph and Mikey next turn. I don't think I should play around that. And just play Chatterfang right now, hoping there's no board wipe. Could also have gone for parallel lives. But this puts us in a position to maybe play Witherbloom next turn. Alright, opponent keeps on ramping. Alright, so I could cast Witherbloom. The only issue is that it leaves me tapped out, so I wouldn't be able to Terra Asunder. So this might be just pass with Terra Asunder available. If they don't go for Raph and Mikey, I still get to Surveil. And we get to hit for 5. Possible they have a protection spell they'll be able to cast alongside their commander. Mox Opal does actually give them an extra mana. So they could easily have a protection spell left. And there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So in response to the Greaves, I will fetch. And see if this works. It does. So we bought ourselves a turn, since now with Mox Opal they can already recast it next turn potentially. So I gotta make this count. So I can go Witherbloom. And then I could still cast Increasing Ambition. And then I kind of want to get the removal spell with Convoke that I'll be able to cast for free. Our opponent will think we're tapped out, but I'll still be able to cast Pile On. So I just need to leave Witherbloom untapped, so it's not too suspicious. Turns out our opponent just had a tapped lane, so couldn't actually cast Raph and Mikey, although we were prepared to deal with it. Alright, so now what's next? Can I go off with Parallel Lives? Can cast it, and then can cast a big for the common good. Make a bunch of extra squirrels. Or I can go for a flashbacked Increasing Ambition, and then from there might be a lethal line. But I kind of just want to have some fun with the Parallel Lives here. So then I want to cast for the common good. So we currently get a 5 mana discount. Plus 2 more from Phyrexian Tower would be 7, so it's still only X equals 3 here. Because we could have potentially sacrificed the creature to Phyrexian Tower while the creature still applied the affinity discount from Witherbloom. So we got a whole bunch of tokens. And then now I do need to leave Witherbloom back on defense to keep a pylon. So now it's a little bit more suspicious. But then next turn we shouldn't have any trouble getting across the finish line. Opponent's just hard casting a Summon Bahamut instead. Can go for Witherbloom. I guess we'll show them what we had. And just 1 mana because it has both Convoke and Affinity. Would have tried to cast Army of the Damned here, since we could have easily replayed Witherbloom for 2 mana, Army of the Damned for 3. But yeah, we already had enough tokens to attack for lethal. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with what looks like a functional hand, although we still need something big kinda to make use of our mana discount, facing green-white counters. So turn 1 could start with a Grazer. Put in Cemetery, and then next turn we can go Cobra into a fetch lane, perhaps. Opponent with a Hardened Scales. Elvish Mystic the draw. Alright, so we'll go Lotus Cobra. Make some green. And this could get Overgrown Tomb. Make some more green. First year, immediately cast a Rampant Growth. Get a Swamp. Make another green. And play Elvish Mystic. Not bad for turn 2. So next turn I can cast Witherbloom, and then, yeah, we're just waiting for some big instant or sorcery to sink all our mana into. Hardened Bonds as well, the Alchemy variant. Audience with Trostani isn't bad. So let's see, can I go Sifter into Witherbloom? I guess we won't quite have the green left over for the audience, but that's okay. Can cast it next turn. And if they try to remove Witherbloom, we can replay it pretty easily. And Bristly Bill. The counters are going to add up pretty quickly, but hopefully we can just go wide enough where we can maybe chum block a larger creature for a while. And get to untap. Alright, so what I could do is first surveil and then draw with the audience. So I can maybe improve my draw step. Don't need the Priest of Titania anymore. So this would draw 2 cards at the moment. Find a Skewed Swarm, alright, that's a good one. Probably want to wait until I can play a land afterwards, so we can immediately trigger Landfall. And then Witherbloom can attack. I also get to scry 1 if my creatures die, which is also helpful. It's easy to forget that it's still only turn 3 here, or our turn 4. So Mikey and Leo will help them draw more cards. So they do have the card advantage angle covered. But it just takes 1 powerful top deck to swing the game around. Emissary can gain them some life. And an Esper Sentinel as well. Okay. 4 energy so they can give stuff flying. So won't be able to block Bill. Unless we want to jump with the Grazer, but I think we can wait. I guess it would let me scry here, which is maybe worth it. There we go, Shamanic Revelation. So we should be able to go off here. And do I play the Skewed Swarm first is a question. Given the landfall from Cobra making an extra green, I think it's okay. Revelation. I will not pay the tax. And we naturally drew Craterhoof Behemoth. Can still Spore Swarm, Cut Down, and Chainer's Edict. I guess we'll start with Cut Down on your Sentinel. And then Edict you. Takes care of the Emissary. And then I can keep up Spore Swarm at instant speed. That's fine. And Witherbloom could also maybe get aggressive. Alright, and then next turn Craterhoof should do it. Just discard a line to hand size. Halia is fine. They will gain some life, but if Craterhoof resolves, I guarantee it'll be enough. I guess there's a chance they can go infinite here with the Moondancer. Although probably not in just green-white, they would need the red mana as well for the Alchemy card. Unless you also have like Heliod plus Curry Oak, I guess that can go infinite. So 1 mana left. And just a halfling. Okay. And Bristly Bill's gonna play defense now. End of turn Spore Swarm. It is tempting to cast Army of the Damned here. Do I have the mana to play it and Craterhoof in the same turn? So this is 3 mana, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I would be 1 short, so I'm afraid Army of the Damned will have to wait for another game. And this should do it. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Dennick. Cards in graveyards cannot be the targets of spells or abilities. That's fine. Our hand is keepable. Could use some actual token makers, so we can eventually copy them with common good. But with the Vitality, we can potentially hardcast the Forerunners once we get enough creatures in play. Hoping our opponent isn't just kind of a blue-white control deck in disguise, because board wipes are very effective against us. Alright, turn 1 Esper Sentinel. Not gonna let them draw off of it, so we'll just surveil turn 1. Turn 2 maybe Caryatid, and then take it from there. I want to use a Delta instead of the Verdant, since Verdant can also get basic Forest. And a Cottage could be okay. Just an extra line drop. We'll start with the Caryatids. Not in a hurry to answer the Sentinel. Opponent passes with a bunch of mana up. Alright, so possible they'll counter the Vitality. I guess that's fine. Just gonna play the tapped Cottage. Spell Queller, okay. I can enable Revolt on Fatal Push with my fetch land to destroy this and get the Vitality back. For now, I could also try to Nature's Rhythm for 2, get a Badger Mole, and then I would still have the fetch land plus Fatal Push line available. Sure, there's a few ways we can play this. So I wouldn't be paying the Sentinel tax. I am incentivized to now Fatal Push in my turn, so they don't get to draw off Sentinel again. Our opponent did have a Wash Away. So now the coast is clear for Fatal Push. And then could get Overgrown Tomb. Don't think the damage is going to matter too much, and I might need triple green later. Alright, so we get our Vitality back, which can now also block. And next turn we can try Witherbloom. Although blue-white might have ways to exile the Vitality. Okay, find a Chatterfang. So could still go for Witherbloom here. Or we could Chatterfang first to test out the waters. If they counter Witherbloom, we'll replay it. The main concern is if they can shut it down with an aura and make it lose its abilities. Okay, and Witherbloom resolves. I wouldn't be able to cast anything with it yet. But if I get to untap, Nature's Rhythm is looking pretty good. This kind of implies that a board wipe is incoming. Try it like this. At least we haven't committed a ton of tokens to the board yet. Yep, there's a Raph. So, Witherbloom back to the command zone, Vitality back in the form of an enchantment. And we'll have to start rebuilding. Opponent could still have a counterspell in hand. It's gonna be a Fairy Vandal. Can maybe destroy that next turn. They did send the Dennick back to the command zone as opposed to leaving it in the graveyard for Disturb. So yeah, really just looking for some creature tokens to synergize with the Vitality and the Common Good. And Dennick is back. And we'll take one. Provisioner, waiting for land. Can still try and cast it. If they have a counter spell, they might fight over it since they don't know that we don't have a land in hand. Opponent fetches. And Provisioner actually resolved, to my surprise. So we can pile on if we'd like. Although the Vandal's not the fastest clock, so it's not bothering me too much. Seal from Existence. And goes for Chatterfang. Maybe I do pile on just for the Surveil 2 now. Alright, lands. I guess Tower has a bit more utility. Already have triple green for Forerunners. I guess quadruple green is useful for Nature's Rhythm. Is there a world where I keep both lands? So next turn, play a land, make a treasure, assuming Provisioner's still there. And then I could Nature's Rhythm and get a 5 or even 6 mana card. Yeah, maybe actually keep the Forest first. Of course, once we do search with Rhythm, I'll have shuffled the other land away. So they can force a shuffle now with Demolition Field if they'd like, although that would also trigger the Provisioner. So not sure if that benefits them. It's the cottage. Alright, so I'm gonna get my treasure one way or another. And draw Reclamation Sage, so I could actually get Chatterfang back. Yeah, 3 mana to play, 3 mana to pay the ward. Seems like a fine turn. Chatterfang is back. And I'll pass a turn here. Alright, so we're starting to get closer to replaying Witherbloom. Our opponent's gonna have a look at our hand. See what they're up against. So we could just make a whole bunch of treasures with the Common Good as well. Okay. Dennick attacks. Yeah, I guess I'll still block. If a board wipe's coming, may as well prevent 2 damage. And this time they are gonna disturb it. Okay. And Lord Skitter. I guess is better now that Dennick is no longer in play. So how do we want to go about things? Probably just cast for the Common Good on the treasure. And then I'll get to make that many squirrels as well. And then from there we should be able to set up Witherbloom pretty nicely. So X equals 3 could work. Okay, and then I could still cast Lord Skitter if I'd like. Or we could go for Witherbloom, but then I wouldn't be able to Nature's Rhythm for any lethal amount yet. I think I wait, just save the treasures in case there is another board wipe coming. And then next turn we should be able to set up lethal one way or another. Take 3 from Dennick. Take my turn. And the Vendilion can take the Forerunners, that's fine. I care more about the Nature's Rhythm in the graveyard. They could have waited until after my draw step. And draw Terra Sunder. And draw Forest. Okay, so get another treasure, in turn another squirrel. And then I think we're going all out here. So I can go a Lord Skitter, 2 mana Witherbloom, and then Rhythm for 8 to get Craterhoof. And I meant to sack the treasures here, but I don't think it's gonna matter too much. Alright, let's get our triggers. And this should do it. But yeah, the squirrels were meant to get in there as well. Alright, sweet. So yeah, took a while to rebuild, but we eventually got there. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Toski, mono green. We have what looks like a keepable hand. Could use some actual creature tokens to then synergize with a common good and eventually go off with a revelation. But turn 2 priest, turn 3 explorer, especially if we draw a fetch land at some point, sets us up pretty nicely. Just gonna play this tapped since we cannot destroy Toski anyways. So I would rather save myself the damage. Because while our opponent might have the advantage early on, they maybe get to draw a few cards. Once we get to the point where we can cast Witherbloom, our deck should be able to go over the top. And opponent pairing Toski with Death Touch creatures, it seems. They might also have their own elves to power up my priest. Possible they also have some fight spells or bite effects to synergize with the Death Touch creatures. So if they do have more removal, the matchup could get harder. So I could play the Explorer and then still play the Halfling afterwards. So if they play Toski and attack with a Viper, I could trade. Although I'm probably better off preserving my creatures. And yeah, it looks like they have a fight spell. At least it was an actual fight, so the Viper also died. And more Death Touch creatures. Would have drawn the fetch land to go with the Explorer as well. That's fine. I get to cast Witherbloom and then Surveil end of turn. Unless we want to keep the Halfling back, but it doesn't even block the Drive profitably, so... Just gotta hope Witherbloom survives for a turn. And then next turn we get to kick things off with a Revelation. Alright, opponent also has Finn. So this would make more sense as their commander from what we've seen so far. But is also gonna start applying poison here, so that's scary. Alright, so we'll Surveil. And then Token Makers would be useful. Dismember is pretty good too, since it can even get rid of Toski. So we'll start with the Revelation, since we don't have any tokens for the common good. Okay, and then you can still play the Caryatids and have a bunch of removal left. There's also Bouncing Say, which we could consider. But I think I'm fine just going Caryatids and then pass with a bunch of answers in hand. Alright, Vorinclex, that's a big one. Okay, we can also double the poison counters, I believe. So, let them go to attackers. And then probably want a Bitter Triumph Vorinclex. See if that works. It does. And then I kind of like the Dismember on Finn and just trade one of my creatures for the Dryads, block Toski. And then I may as well fetch for a swamp here, save myself some damage. And then Toski wouldn't be able to get through. Alright, and there's a Chord of Calling, excellent. So I only get a 3 mana discount. So what can we get? Could also start Earthbending here, to be fair. But Chord of Calling, 3, 4, 5... So I could Chord for 8 to get Craterhoof, and then only attack with Witherbloom and Craterhoof, both getting +4/+4. So that would be 18 damage total. So it's almost lethal. Yeah, I guess that's good enough, or we can just Earthbend for a turn and go for it next turn. And for now, just send in Witherbloom and Priest to leave the other blockers back. Alright, Nissa is kind of scary. Just gonna make a token. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. Next turn, Chord should be lethal. So yeah, we got to see Witherbloom do some pretty busted things, mostly tutoring up Craterhoof Behemoth. Possible the deck would be more interesting without it, but if you're just interested in winning and closing out games quickly, Craterhoof Behemoth will be your guy. So yeah, the deck seems very powerful. It does require a little bit of setup, but the fact that you can potentially play Witherbloom with just a handful of tokens in play and then immediately combo off and get your Craterhoof to attack for lethal is quite impressive. So it's definitely a commander to watch out for. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.